Thank you, Madam President. Once again, I thought the debate was going to go a little longer and walked out of the chamber. Let me just say, first of all, I urge rejection of this award for a number of reasons. It's been said that the history of the wages for those folks who are under this agreement have been stagnant for a while, and there's a reason for that. This body voted on a budget not to increase those line items. And why did we do that? Because we can't afford it. Because Ben Barnes, when he spoke, is absolutely right, that we cannot afford the wages in the case and the benefits that go along with it. So that's why those line items were frozen. Now, and this body made that fiscal decision to go ahead and do that. If the argument is that the attorney generals who do good work, and it's not against these guys at all, but they raise revenue, well, because in statutes we provide for the remedies which include collecting these fees and costs and penalties. So of course they're going to raise. That's why we hire them. And you can't look at them and say because they're bringing that much revenue, they deserve a wage increase. No, we write the statutes to stack it in that favor. And anybody who's had administrative proceedings, enforcement actions, at the end of the day, you settle out the matter because you can't fight an unlimited resource like the state of Connecticut. So I question whether or not that is a worthwhile venture in that regard. Madam President, we've seen OPM Secretary Barnes state with clarity, protecting the state of Connecticut. He says that Connecticut rating has been downgraded 9 times in the last 8 years and has the 3rd worst rating of all the states. A poor credit rating impacts our ability to access capital at reasonable rates. Connecticut has the highest tax burden, the 4th highest per capita tax burden of all the states. Talks about Connecticut residents are leaving the state of Connecticut. This is someone who for years have been doing the books and records, and as the accountant for the state of Connecticut says, we are in trouble, do not support this agreement, if you would, to the arbiters. He's on our side. He is telling us in his testimony through the arbiters, this contract is going to tie the hands of the state fiscally to the point of strangulation. Now, that's under the ability to pay provision. Interestingly, under the ability to pay provision, the unions strike back with an argument that the restructuring deal that passed on partisan lines when we were tied 18-18 in the state Senate with the lieutenant governor at the time casting the, not this one, but the former, casting the deciding vote to do the recalculation of the union benefits or the union debt by moving it out a bunch of years. And that would give us more flexibility for income. And that was debated in this chamber, arguing it's going to cost us more. And the argument was back, yes, but we're going to save some money so our fixed costs go down because we're going to take that debt, refinance it, and span it out over time. And in the very same breath, the union says in here, you did that, you got more money, now you got to give us more money for our contracts. Then I say, why did we ever do that? Why did we ever refinance so our constituents, although it was by a partisan vote, Democrats voted yes, Republicans voted no, but the argument was it's going to give us more flexibility in the budget, and immediately the unions go after that flexibility and say, well, you got more money to pay. That certainly is going to send a flare in this building to say, the next time you see a refinance package come here that's been talked about in this building, whether it's teachers or the existing deal, and you're going to spread that over the time, recognize it's going to be thrown back in your face. It's going to be thrown back in your face. We also said that the rate that we had, which was, I think, 8.1% or something, we dropped down to 6.9% for investment return. They argue, well, that's the lowest rate around the country, and it was, so that we made sure we made the right payments. They're saying, therefore, since you lowered it so much, you're probably going to make more money in the market. Therefore, there's more room to raise union contract wages. Well, we're not doing it for that. We're doing it for social services. We're doing it for our towns who need pilot money. We're doing it for ECS. Those are the things we're doing this for. So we can get mental health in order by giving the proper finances and care for kids programs. That's why we do it. We're not making room to get more fixed obligations by union contracts. That isn't why we did it. And that was the argument, I might add, in this circle. And yet this refinance is being thrown back at us like, well, now that you got this extra money, we get to spend it. Madam President, that's the economic reason why we should reject this contract. Madam President, I would also like to point out some other reasons. It's been said, I did write a letter to Governor Lamont, Senator Formica and myself did, as Senator Austin correctly pointed out. And one of the things that was said in that letter was that the 2017 CBAC agreement that was approved by the General Assembly contained language that this agreement is going to follow. Well, I got to tell you, I beg to differ. That 2017 agreement specifically says the Assistant Attorney General Bargaining Unit, the unit will negotiate and arbitrate provision of their collective bargaining agreements through June 30th, 2021, but will be subject to the health care benefits and all those other things, pension health care. But the wage issue and other factors are not specifically part of the agreement. It's excluded in the back of the CBAC agreement. They were negotiating at the time, and it was, look, you're negotiating, we're going to exclude you from this agreement. So why the argument is the letter, and the letter says, well, we can't deviate from this document. No, you can. Specifically, the Attorney General's office. So I disagree that somehow their hands were tied relative to these negotiations. To further that argument, I might add, in the arbitration award, it was said that the 2%, as I think Senator Austin pointed out, the lower increment of 2% is compared to approximately 3.5%, 3.1% under the CBAC agreement. In other words, they should have gotten 3.1%, but they only got 2%, so this is a better deal. Well, either you're saying you can negotiate the prior terms or you can't negotiate the prior terms. You can't say you can't negotiate the prior terms, but we did. Either you do or you don't. You got to live by one reading of the contract or the other reading. You can't selectively pick. But I would argue with what I showed you in this document being the CBAC agreement, plus the fact that they did negotiate other terms of the agreement, leads you to the conclusion that the original 2017 CBAC agreement can be negotiated. So what do we really have here? Madam President, Governor Lamont argues that it's going to take 2/3 to reject this agreement. Now, I would push back on that and say no. It's majority to reject this agreement. It should be 2/3 to approve it, majority to reject, to approve the agreement. I should say it in the positive. It takes more than 50%. I've been taught by a professor over there in the corner that perhaps I am wrong on that interpretation. I would argue it is foggy at best, murky at worst, and we'll have a conversation later. But I would think that this has to be done by majority in this case to be approved. Madam President, I would also point out one last thing. In the letter, Governor Lamont said he argued that the case has been decided virtue of arbitration by each party's coming in and giving their side of the tale and making an argument. Madam President, the arbitration award points out to a woefully inadequate representation by the state of Connecticut. 9 times, the arbitrator points out the state failed to present evidence or failed to do their job or did not make any argument in the brief or did not present any evidence or did not offer any evidence on the record. 9 times. Why not send it back and give the state a fair chance of making a fair argument that this contract should not be as it is presented here today? 9 times. And if you read the arbiter's decision, they are not softball, they could have. It is they should have and they didn't. You read this, it's a total failure by the state. They made a facial argument and didn't back it up by one piece of evidence. Almost like a laying down for this agreement. They said the salaries are going to be higher than private sector when you add in other benefits. Presented no evidence. It goes on in this agreement. So how could you say our constituents got a fair shake? Because that's who's paying for this. That's who's going to end up paying for this, our constituents. How do you say they got a fair shake when the arbiter said, no, they didn't? There's nothing in the evidence to support their position other than them facially saying it. Madam President, I would ask that this contract be rejected, that the matter go back to arbitration. Madam President, I may also say that Governor Lamont argues if it goes back, you don't know what's going to happen. I agree with that. But what I do know is when you have 9 instances in which the arbiter says we didn't make any evidential advancements on the very issues that go to salary and wages, I would think we got a pretty good chance if we produce some evidence at this proceeding, some relevant evidence at this proceeding, that perhaps we're right as the state of Connecticut. And perhaps Ben Barnes, former OPM secretary, is correct when he says we cannot afford this contract, period. So I urge rejection. Thank you, Madam President.